Claiming Social Security at 62 instead of 70 can cost you $150,000. That's just one lever. There are two more, and one of them decides what your spouse receives after you're gone. So if you're 50 or over, the decisions you make in the next few years decide one thing: options or corner. So this video isn't about what went wrong. It's about what you do right now. I'll show you all three levers and exactly where the money is, including a benefit 4 in 10 Americans don't know exists, plus when each window opens and closes. So I track where AI, policy, and aging collide. That's where the patterns show up and where families get blindsided or get ahead. So let's start with the lever that has the biggest dollar impact. Lever 1, timing decisions. This is the lever with the biggest dollar impact, and it's the one most people pull too early. When you claim Social Security matters more than almost any other retirement decision. This is the monthly check you've been paying into your whole working life. And when you start collecting it, changes what you receive forever. So you can start collecting as early as age 62. But if you do, your check is permanently reduced, roughly 30% smaller than if you wait until 70. 30%. Permanent. Well, that's not a penalty. That's just how the math works. The government assumes if you start early, you'll collect for more years. So each check is smaller. So here's what that looks like over time. If you claim at 62 instead of 70, and you live 20 more years, that's 30% reduction. It adds up. And for many people, that's $100,000 difference or more. So I talked to a person in Arizona last year, 63 years old. His company had just done layoffs, and he was tired. 31 years at the same place. He sat across from me and said, "I just want to be done." Well, I understand that feeling of wanting to finally stop. But when we ran his numbers, here's what we found. If he claimed at 63, his monthly check would be $1,840. And if he waited until 70, even if he had to piece together part-time work or draw down savings for a few years, his check would be $2,480 each month for life. Well, that's $640 a month, $7,600 a year. Over 20 years, well, that's more than $150,000. Well, he didn't know. Nobody has shown him the math. So now here's what most people miss. This isn't just about you. If you're married, your claiming decisions affect something called the survivor benefit. That's the money your spouse receives after you die. And here's how it works. When one spouse passes away, the surviving spouse can switch to the deceased spouse Social Security amount if it's higher than their own. But that survivor benefit is based on what the deceased spouse was actually receiving, not what they could have received, what they were getting. So if you're the higher earner and you claim early, your spouse's survivor benefit is based on that reduced amount forever, for the rest of their life. But if you delay, if you wait until 70, your spouse inherits the higher benefit when you pass. Claiming early doesn't just shrink your check, it can shrink theirs for years, maybe decades. So the timing of when you access retirement accounts matters too. There are specific ages where the tax rules change. So at 59 and a half, you can withdraw from most retirement accounts without a 10% early withdrawal penalty. At 72 or 73, depending on when you were born, you're required to start taking money out. These are called required minimum distributions. You miss them, and the IRS penalizes you. So each of those ages is a decision point, not a deadline to fear, a lever to pull. And here's one that most people never see coming. Medicare premium timing. Medicare Part B costs around $200 a month in 2026. That's a piece of your federal health coverage that handles doctor visits and outpatient care. But if your income goes above certain levels, you pay more. It's called IRMAA, a surcharge for higher earners. The brackets jump fast, cross the first threshold, and suddenly you're paying $285. Go higher, and it's $400 or $500. Well, here's what catches people. Medicare looks at your income from 2 years ago. A decision you make this year affects what you pay in 2028. So I talked to a couple in Ohio who sold a rental property the year before they retired. A one-time income spike. Well, they didn't think about how it would affect Medicare. That sale pushed them into a higher IRMAA bracket. For 24 months, they paid almost $1,950 more in premiums than they expected. You see, not because they did anything wrong, because nobody told them timing mattered. So that's lever one. Timing isn't just about Social Security. It's about the whole picture. When you claim, when you retire, and when you sell assets, and how all of it connects to what you'll pay. So that's timing. Think about your own situation for a second. Which of those windows is closest for you? The second lever is the one most people leave on the table. Lever 2, benefits you're missing. There are benefits built into the system that 4 in 10 Americans don't know exist. We already talked about the survivor benefits. That's when a widow or widower can claim based on their deceased spouse's record. But there's also something called a spousal benefit. Well, this is different. This is for while you're both still alive. If one spouse earned significantly more than the other over their career, the lower earning spouse might be able to claim up to 50% of the higher earner's benefit instead of their own smaller amount. So you don't get both, but if you get the higher of the two, and a lot of couples never even check, you see, Medicare coordination with retirement timing matters too. So if you get this wrong, you can end up paying thousands more for coverage during the exact years you're trying to preserve savings. And there's a 2026 change that directly affects what you pay for prescription. There's now a hard cap on what you pay out of pocket for prescription drugs. Under Medicare Part D, that's your prescription drug coverage. You pay a monthly premium and portions of your drug costs throughout the year. Sounds manageable. For a lot of people, it wasn't. Before this cap, those costs could spiral. People on expensive medications could pay $5,000 to $10,000, even more per year, out of pocket. Well, the cap is $2,000 a year, started in 2025. Once you hit that, Medicare covers the rest. Well, this came from something called the Inflation Reduction Act, a law passed in 2022 that included several Medicare changes. Well, according to the Department of Health and Human Services, over 11 million Medicare enrollees are projected to hit this cap. The average savings, about $600 per year. For people with higher drug costs, it's closer to $1,100. Well, that's real money back in your pocket without changing anything about your coverage. For expensive conditions, cancer drugs, specialty medications, the savings can hit $4,000 to $6,000 a year. But nobody's going to call you and explain this. You have to know it exists. And beyond federal programs, there are state-specific programs. Depending on where you live, there may be property tax relief for seniors, prescription assistance programs, caregiver support funds, programs designed for people in exactly your situation. Most people don't find these until they're already in crisis. By then, some enrollment windows have closed. So the system doesn't explain your options. You have to know what to ask. So there is a shortcut. Ask AI or Claude or ChatGPT, what senior benefit programs exist in my state? You'll get a starting list in 60 seconds. Property tax relief, prescription assistance, caregiver funds, not everything, but more than most people ever find. So that's lever 2, knowing what exists before you need it. So which of these 3 levers feels most urgent for you right now? Drop it in the comments. Lever 3, family coordination. This is the lever that breaks families or bonds them. Nobody wants to be the first one to bring up the will. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people know they should be having these conversations. They just don't want to. It feels awkward. It feels like admitting something might go wrong, like you're inviting bad luck by talking about it. So they wait. And waiting is a choice. It's just not a neutral one. Families who have these conversations before crisis, who talk about expectations, about support, about what happens if, well, those families don't just make better financial decisions. They make decisions together, with margin, with time to adjust. The alternative? Well, one sibling becomes the caregiver by default. Others disappear. Savings get spent down in months because nobody planned for who pays what. I've seen it happen. A parent needs care. Nobody talked about it ahead of time. One adult child quits their job to help. The others assume someone else is handling it. Resentment builds. Money runs out. And by the time everyone's in the same room, it's a crisis, not a conversation. Well, this isn't about having a perfect plan. It's about having the conversation before the conversation gets forced on you. Well, questions like this. Who makes medical decisions if someone can't speak for themselves? Where are the accounts, the passwords, the paperwork, the policies? What's the plan if long-term care is needed? Who pays? Who helps? You don't need all the answers right now. You need the conversation to get started. And if you don't know how to start a conversation, well, ask ChatGPT or Claude to get you going. Give me 5 questions to ask my siblings about our parents' care plan. You'll have a draft in a minute. It's not a conversation, but it's a door or opening a door. Because the families who talk about these kind of stuff early, they're not just smarter. They're not just richer. They just gave themselves time to figure it out together. Well, here's the truth. This isn't about memorizing policy. It's not about spreadsheets or calculators. It's about knowing where your levers are before someone else pulls them for you. Timing, benefits, family. 3 things you can actually control. 3 things that change outcomes. So you can decide this isn't for you, that you'll figure it out later. But the families who wait, they don't get fewer options. They get cornered. And a year from now, you'll either be glad you understood this or standing in a government office wondering why nobody explained it sooner. The deadline isn't a single date. It's a series of windows, and some of them start closing sooner than you think. Well, this isn't about being right. It's about whether your family has options. Well, I used to think control meant certainty, having all the answers, knowing exactly what would happen. But watching my own family navigate aging, watching my sister live abroad and then losing her life to cancer, and then losing a loved one during COVID, being alone on the other side of the world, I learned something very different. Control isn't certainty. It's decisions. The things you can actually reach out and move. That's what changes the math. You came into this video wondering if you waited too long. So now you know. The question was never about time. It was about seeing the levers while you can still pull them. Timing, benefits, family. 3 levers. 3 things that you still control. That $100,000 difference I mentioned at the start, well, it's not about the money. It's about what the money means. Time, choices, dignity. The difference isn't luck. It isn't wealth. It isn't starting earlier. It's whether you see these levers early enough to actually use them. So you're not out of moves. You just needed someone to show you where the levers are. So now you know where they are. If this helped, send it to someone in your family. One thing this week, go to the SSA.gov, that's Social Security Administration.gov. Create an account if you don't have one, and look at your statement. See what you're projected to receive at 62, at 67, and at 70. Just see the numbers. And if you want to go deeper on Social Security, the 2026 changes and how to optimize your claiming strategy, I made a video on that. The link is in the description. So you know where the levers are now. Start with one. That's how this actually changes. See you in the next video.